If you're trying to get a great score on the MCAT, here's a workshop that I recently did where I go over the exact system that all of my tutoring students use, and recently it helped students of mine score a 511, a 515, 517, 523, and a 524. You can find a link in my bio that will take you to my MCAT content library and office hours program, and that's where you're going to find a chunk of the same resources that I reference a lot during this workshop. I'm going to start with the schedule here, and the biggest thing with all MCAT prep, and sorry if any of this is redundant with like TikToks you've seen. I don't know what TikToks people have and haven't seen, so I'll just be covering a lot of stuff. If it sounds familiar, just kind of hang along until there's stuff that you haven't heard before. But the biggest thing as we get into the schedule is that there's no content phase and then a practice question phase. This is from both like my experience with tutoring for a few years and then also research on learning. It's a really horrible idea to not do practice questions while you're learning content. So if there's one thing you take away from this, do not do a content phase and then a practice question phase. Really, really bad stuff to do that. So first thing, looking at this, is when you first start scheduling everything out, I would recommend that you start with general chemistry. The reason for this is that Gen Chem is going to provide a lot of the basis stuff that comes up later. Let me just admit people as they come in. Okay. Cool. So yeah, Gen Chem is where you're going to want to start because that's going to build into things like org. Org is going to build into biochem and so on. So when you start with Gen Chem, you're going to start with going over your content, but this isn't like a content phase. You're going to be doing content for like a day or maybe like 2 or 3 days, and then instantly followed up with practice questions. So I would recommend UWorld for practice questions pretty hands down. I think things like Blueprint and Kaplan, their version of hard is like, let me just ask you the most low yield thing we can think of. And that's not going to really prep you for the test because that's just like who has done the most Anki, and that person's going to do good on Kaplan test. But the real thing is more about having you apply the general knowledge, but in difficult ways. And that's what you. So let me admit, just keep that in mind when you choose your practice questions. UWorld, again, just can't recommend it enough. So let's take a look at UWorld because this is going to be kind of how we base the schedule off of, or what we base the schedule off of. Let me get out of this practice question. So when you create a test on UWorld, for those of you who haven't used it before, it breaks down the topics just like this. So if we look at general chemistry, you see how there's 4 sections right here. And what we're going to do is base our first couple days off of section 1. So this is what we call section 1 of general chemistry. And we're prepping like this is like our test. We're going over the chapters that are going to prep us for this of UWorld questions. And with that, just keep admitting. Back to the UWorld. Okay, so we're prepping for those questions. And the reason for this is that questions are so important that we're trying to do them very, very early on, but we don't want to just jump in completely blind because that's just basically it's just like too much cognitive load to where you can't learn anything if the cognitive load is too high. So we are going to kind of build up to those questions, but it's only going to be like a 2 or 3 day process. So now let's go back to our schedule and look at exactly how we're prepping for that UWorld section. So this says to outline section 1 Gen Chem PDFs. What that's saying is go over the content that preps you for section 1 of the UWorld General Chemistry. Now, I'm going to use the content library that I've created. So it's like my textbook, if you will. You can do this with stuff like Kaplan. You'll just have to figure out what Kaplan chapters correspond to UWorld. I will talk about some advantages that my stuff has over Kaplan and kind of some reasons that I would suggest you use this over Kaplan, but it doesn't necessarily not work if you're going with Kaplan. But let me show you what you need to do if you're using Kaplan or if you're using my stuff. So over here is it's called a progressive checklist, and this tells you what PDFs or what units from my content library are going to prep you for section 1 of UWorld. And that's so let me just bounce a little bit back and forth. This is what this is saying. Outline section 1 of those PDFs. This progressive checklist tells you these are the units that you need to cover. If you're enrolled in the course that I have, let me go to Gen Chem. It looks like this. You can find all of those PDFs on the left. You would click on that, and here are your units. So it's unit 1 through 13. You just scroll down, you can see all 13, and then unit 35, which is at the bottom. If we open up one of these, it's just a PDF. Scroll to the bottom, and here's your downloadable PDF. And if you're doing Kaplan, it would be like chapters 1 through 3, I believe, is what corresponds to section 1. But with these, and here's the advantage that personally I think these have over Kaplan, and it's why I would recommend that you do these over Kaplan. When I was tutoring for the first few years of tutoring, a huge chunk of tutoring was telling people, this is important, this is not important. Don't worry about this, focus on this. After a few years, it was like, okay, instead of going through this with everyone I tutor, let me just make my own stuff. So that way it's very clear. And that's what these PDFs are. So you can go through the entire PDF knowing everything is really high yield and there's no time wasted. And what this is my favorite part about these, and what I think is going to help you the most, is that you can dive completely into these with the goal of 100% memorization. And it's realistic because the low yield stuff is cut out. And it's really important that you reach that 100%. Once again, because the low yield stuff is cut out, all we have left is high yield. So when you're using these PDFs, your goal is literally, like, this is not a, get to 50%. It's memorize everything. When you're doing this, you want to be focusing a lot on why. So let's say you're reading something like this. One's really straightforward. It gets a little tougher with the harder subjects. But let's say you are reading something about like equation 1.1. Charge is equal to protons minus electrons. Don't just read that and memorize. Think about, well, why is that true? And this one's pretty easy, where it's just, okay, protons are positive, electrons are minus. If we do 10 protons minus 11 electrons, yeah, that makes sense that we have a -1 charge. So constantly be thinking about why as you read through these PDFs, or if you are going with Kaplan, do it with whatever your content resource is. Let me just put a pause and see, does anyone have any questions that they want to ask before we kind of just keep going? Okay. And again, just feel free. Don't be shy about asking questions, and I'll check. Also, feel free to type in the chat. I'll just check back, see if anyone did that. Okay. If not, I'll just keep going. Just feel free to interrupt if you have any questions. So back to this. Okay. So you are memorizing and you're reteaching, or sorry, you're reading through all of the PDF, and then you're focusing a ton on memorizing it. And you're going to do that, remember, for all of these PDFs. And that's prepping you for section 1 of UWorld. Once you've done that and you feel like you have a great mastery of this, you're going to go into UWorld. You'll select that section 1 and you'll do about 30 questions from it. You want to shoot for probably about 75%, depending on your goal score. If you're wanting like a 520, 80% is honestly more where you want to be. If you're wanting a 515, 75% should get you there. If you get 75% on everything, probably like, I would say 70% is probably pretty good for 510, but just the higher, the better. Okay. Feel free to jump in, ask any questions. This is your general template. And what I'm going to talk about now is the techniques that I would recommend to go through those PDFs and to learn and memorize them. So we're going to do that, but just feel free to ask any questions before I jump into that. This is kind of a good stopping point for any questions, if anybody has any. Okay. Okay, so question about the 70%. The 70%, after you go through all those PDFs and you feel like you have a good understanding of them, and then you do that set of UWorld questions, which let's look at the schedule when we talk about that. So this was the part about going over those PDFs. This is the part about doing those UWorld questions. This might take you, let's say it takes you like 3 days. So don't follow, this doesn't mean do it in 1 day. This is just like the first thing that you do. Let's say it takes you 3 days to do it. And then on that 4th day, you're going to do UWorld questions. Ideally, you try to get about 75% on those UWorld questions. But if you're aiming for like a 520, you're going to want an 80%. If you're aiming for like 510, 70% is probably fine. So that's on those UWorld questions. Okay, that is going to be the template that we're going to do for section 1 of Gen Chem. We're going to do the same thing for section 2. Notice how it's outlined the section 2 Gen Chem PDFs. You would use this tracker. You'd go down here. Those are those section Gen Chem PDFs. Okay, and let me check. Okay, so this question is about, are the PDFs supposed to be done alongside something like Anki? That is a perfect question to ask right as I am going to just talk about what you should be doing to get this stuff memorized. Okay, so let me click on this right here. So this is the recommended technique that I would use to memorize things. I already talked about when you read through it, just be asking a lot of questions, be trying to understand things really deeply. Think about how can I explain this and teach it to somebody who doesn't know much about science. Just read for understanding. Once you're done, I would recommend taking this approach. This completely replaces Anki and note taking. So don't take notes, just read and understand. And I would just strongly, I'd say maybe not quite strongly, but pretty strong, don't do Anki. Once again, that's it's a pretty research-based thing. That's called cued recall. Cued recall is good if your test is cued recall. So if you have a test that's like, what's the definition of the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation? That's when you'd want to do Anki. The MCAT is not even close to that. So ideally, don't do Anki. You want to be doing something that's giving you less cues because you're trying to teach stuff from the ground up with basically no hints. And when you try to do that, A, it's a lot harder than Anki. B, it's closer to the actual test. And the more you practice teaching it with nothing in front of you, the better mastery you're going to have and understanding of how this topic is explained by and connects to all these other topics. And that's the type of skill you're going to need on the test. And this here is the approach I'd recommend that you take for it. What I'm going to go over right here, this is like it's a super simple thing that you could apply like right now. You could go to study right now and start applying this. It's not necessarily the only way to do it. It's just super simple and in my opinion, really effective. Everybody that I tutor uses it. And again, I think they just find it so simple. They go with it and they don't really have any issues applying it. So what this is, I'm going to use Unit 31 as an example. So here's the PDF for Unit 31. It's Foundations of Acids and Bases. So let's pretend I took 30 minutes. I read through it. I was asking questions, really trying to dissect every single sentence. I practiced reteaching it. After I do all that and I feel like I truly understand it, I make this outline. And what I want you to notice about this is how bare it is. So this is the title of that outline. This says Lewis bases, and let's just look at how this is talking about like definitions of acids and bases. This is acid and base strength. And then down here, it talks about pH and pOH. So what this outline is pretty much just talking about what topics were covered in that PDF. And notice how it's not giving us any of the actual information. So like if you had a quiz over this PDF, this outline is not going to help you because there's no actual information in there. And that's good. That's exactly what you want your outlines to look like. And then using this, you're going to try to teach every single thing in that PDF from memory. So you would look at like Lewis acids and bases, and you would think, okay, a Lewis acid, that's an electron acceptor. An example would be a carbonyl carbon, and a Lewis base is an electron donor. An example could be a nitrogen with this lone pair. The lone pair would attack the carbonyl. That's where we have the Lewis base and the Lewis acid. So you're doing that purely from memory. You're not looking up anything. And when you do this, it's going to be way, way more challenging than flashcards. And that's the point. A rule of thumb you can kind of go with is if you're doing a study technique that you can effectively do while like on a train or while, I don't know, like listening to, even honestly, it's like listening to music a bit, you're probably not studying. You're not doing a technique that's like challenging you enough. You need to be thinking really hard. There's even research on study techniques that says if something feels easy, it's not good. Like it's not effective. So there's even research to back this idea that studying should feel really, really challenging and mentally taxing. And so you would do this for the entire PDF. And then once you're done, and you want to go back and check the PDF and see how well you did, how accurate you were, see if you missed any gaps, and see if you explained things exactly how they are. Now, this part is going to be a lot on you to hold yourself accountable. You have to be honest with yourself. And I think deep down, people generally know when they're doing a good job or not, but it's hard to admit it because it's going to be more work. But when you check that PDF, you have to be perfect. Your explanations have to match it. Not word for word, but they have to be accurate. And if you need someone else's input to help you decide, was that accurate? Go get it. Find a friend to help you study. If you're part of the course here, you can attend office hours. So in this events tab here, there's office hours you can come to. You can ask me any questions you have and see how accurate your understanding is, or you can send me any direct messages. So you can use me as a resource to kind of check your understanding. But if you're, I've also just like use friends, use whatever resources that you can. And then once you do that and you figure out what things you missed, keep a list of that. So let's say you missed something like, let's just say you weren't sure on the equation for POH. So let's just make that a little bit bigger. You weren't sure on the equation for POH or what KW is, which the auto ionization of water. Those were the two things you missed. Go back and practice. Go look at the PDF, go for pretty good understanding, reread it, and then practice recalling again. And you're just recalling, reteaching until it's perfect. And you can do it without looking at anything except this really bare outline. And that's what I would recommend completely takes the place of Anki. Any questions about that process, you do it for, if we go back real quick, for section 1, those Gen Chem PDFs, you do it for all of these PDFs. When you're on to section 2, you would do it for all of these PDFs. It takes a long time and it's extremely mentally taxing. And both of those things are, to be honest, it's good. That's how you want studying to feel. But with this being, the fact that you're going so in depth and you're challenging yourself this much, you're going to leave with a with a much better mastery and a longer lasting mastery, to where you're not going to have to go back over stuff over and over and over like you might with Anki, and hopefully you have better understanding of it than you would taking other routes. So any questions with this approach here? Okay. I missed a question a few minutes ago about how long should it take to do 30 UWorld questions? On UWorld, just do it timed. So select the timed thing right here, and it's going to give you the timing that they calculate, and just trust whatever they calculate. Okay, let me just wait like 10 seconds. Any questions over any of this? You can do the chat, you can unmute and ask whatever you want. Okay. Okay, so now we have talked about going over all of those PDFs and then following it up with practice questions. So the next layer of this is what to do with your review process. So once you do your practice questions, let's look at the schedule. Here's those 30 practice questions, just this first line. Next, review it. Oh, hang on, I got a question. Okay, there's a hand raised. Do you have a question?
No, I'm just gonna tell you to check out the chat.
You said check the chat? Oh, okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so first one, how long does this take until test day from starting? That's just crazy dependent on your schedule. Like, are you working full-time? Are you a full-time student? I would say let's just pretend someone's a full-time student and let's pretend somebody is studying about part-time and they are like a mid student. They're not taking like 16, 17 credit hours. Maybe they're in like the 14 range. They're studying part-time and they're starting from like a 500. So all those things considered, I would say like 4 months, you should be really prepared for the test. if your goal is like 515 plus, or maybe hopefully, I mean, ideally you can get higher, like 517. But that's so dependent on how many hours you have to study and where's your starting point and what your goal score is. But don't plan on 3 months. I hate the 3 month time frame. I would try to give yourself more like 6 months. If you're super disciplined, I think 4 months you could go from like a 500 to like 515 range, but always give yourself more time. And then, does this work for psych soc? Yeah, definitely works for psych soc, but I think psych soc is one where like you can get away with Anki because the test is a little bit more cued recall, kind of just spit out definitions. I'd probably still do this method, but I don't think you're not like going down the wrong path by doing Anki for psych soc like you would be with the other topics. Okay. So just keep typing in questions. Thank you for the hand raise. And let's look at reviewing passages. Okay, so I have a review or a passage thing down here. So this is just a paragraph from a UWorld passage. And whenever you're reviewing, this should take a long time at the beginning as you're trying to build up your skills. So until you're scoring like 512 or higher, let's say like 510 maybe, your review process should be time consuming because you probably don't have the skills or content mastery yet to quickly break down a passage. So if you're going really fast, take a pause, get some feedback. If you're in the community, you can get my feedback, or get a friend to like give you some feedback. But let's look at an example of the review. So this is untimed, totally untimed. Whenever you're reading through a sentence, you want to be asking yourself, how can I use what I know to explain this way deeper and expand on it to where someone without a science background could really understand what I'm saying? And so let's just break down this part here. And we might even skip a couple parts because even a breakdown of just this short piece could take like 15 minutes. So we're kind of move a little bit quicker. I'll point some stuff out as we go. Okay. So this is saying within the renal system, which is talking about the kidneys. And it's saying that the two buffers operate to counter the production of excess H plus from luminal H2CO3. So highlighting the luminal part, that lets us know that if we look at the nephron, which is a system of tubes, the lumen is inside that tube. So this is surrounded by tissue. The nephron is going to take the filtrate all the way out of the body. So this is talking about excess H plus in that lumen. Oh, sorry, I'm off screen. Okay, so yeah, so it's talking about excess H plus within the lumen of the nephron, and the nephron is this tube that I've drawn here. So again, you want to be thinking about all this as you're reviewing because you have no time limit. You're just challenging yourself to understand it to perfection. And it's saying that that excess H plus is coming from this. Well, this is an acid that you should know the name of. This is carbonic acid. And what carbonic acid does is it dissociates. Let me write out the equation here. It dissociates into H plus HCO3 minus, and that is bicarb, which is part of that bicarb buffer system. So all these things are things that like you're literally writing out these things. This is not me giving like, hey, this is actually excess. This is what you should be doing during your review process. Okay. And it says that these two buffers are countering the production of this. So how does a buffer work? Why does it make sense that it would counter the production of H plus? The buffer is going to be a weak acid. Let me just draw a weak acid here. We'll just say it's HA. And it's going to be a mixture of HA and the conjugate base, which is A minus. And then we'll throw plus H plus. So any excess H plus is going to attach to HA to create more A plus. And that's going to prevent the pH from going up because pH is dependent on the H plus concentration. So instead of increasing H plus, we are just combining it with A minus to make more HA. So then we don't have a change in pH. Okay, I'll just pause here because again, we could keep going and going and going. but that's the level of breakdown that you want to be doing. And how deep you can go, it does depend on like where your level of mastery is. So if I'm tutoring someone and like they're pretty new, I'm not expecting them to go this in depth. I'm just looking for what do they probably know right now, and are they recognizing it in this piece of the passage? Can they apply the stuff that they should know? So let's say it's like unit 1 of Gen Chem, and the question or the passage is more about like electron configuration. I'm just looking about, can they talk about the electron configuration stuff? If there's pieces of the passage that's about acids and bases, I know they haven't covered that yet. I'm not worried about it. So just kind of balance this based on your own preparation. Just make sure you are applying everything that you know as best as you can. Okay. As you do this, let me find that tab again. Okay. You're going to go through the entire passage like this. It could easily take an hour to go through a passage, especially at the beginning. And one of the biggest things that you have to remind yourself is that MCAT prep is quality over quantity to like the nth degree. You have to prioritize quality. One thing that I tell people who I tutor is a big red flag is somebody that comes to me and they say, my score is not good and I completed all of UWorld. There's an instantaneous sign that their review process is not deep enough. Because if you have a really deep review process and you review every single passage in UWorld, you're like a lock for a 515 plus, if not like 520. So don't rush the review. Don't even have a goal of finishing X amount of questions. That does not matter. The only thing that matters is mastering material. And you get that through the recall process that we talked about and through reviewing passages like this. You don't get it by just doing a bunch of questions. All that being said, if your review process is like this, from this point forward, it's just a matter of reps. So if you're doing this level of quality, then you can start to add the quantity. And if you get enough questions in, you're going to do great on the test. Any questions about this review process idea? Oh, let me check the chat. Okay. So the last kind of piece of this is like, let's say you're reviewing this and you're looking at reaction 1. And breaking this down, you're trying to think about the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, and you realize you can't. You're like, man, I forgot the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. Go to your outline about acids and bases that we have somewhere around here, up here. And what you would want to do is make a note that you forgot the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. And so find the piece of your outline that it makes the most sense to record this. And this isn't like necessarily exactly where you want to put it, but just for example, right here, you would want to write, I'll write the QID because that's what UWorld uses. Let's say the QID is like 403246. You can then search that QID on UWorld and pull up this passage again to like remind yourself of it. Honestly, what I would do, I would just take a screenshot. So take a screenshot of the passage. Take a screenshot, put that in here, and then the next time that you're reviewing this, you'll have the screenshot over here that reminds you, hey, the last time I tried to apply the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, I was unable to do it. So then you can put extra emphasis on the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, go back to that screenshot and make sure you can apply it. And this way, you have a way to track that you missed something on a practice question, you reviewed it and it made sense, but now you want it here so that way in the future, you can make sure you're hitting it again so you're not forgetting it. And that's so crucial. It doesn't matter how much you learn from practice questions. If you don't remember it, it doesn't mean anything. So you have to be recording the stuff you learned from practice questions. And then if you remember all the stuff you learned from practice questions and all the stuff from the PDFs that I have, you're good. So, and that, I mean, that's not easy. That's a lot of stuff, but it simplifies how to do well on the MCAT. Memorize what you learned from UWorld, memorize what's in those PDFs, and be able to teach and explain those things. Don't just memorize the facts, memorize the why, understand the concepts, and then you're good, and do this review process. Okay. Yeah, and ChatGPT can be pretty good. Try to give it as like specific as tasks as possible. I would probably, I don't know if I'd ask it to do like a whole chapter at once, maybe just like a little blurb. Um, it is good. Just maybe do like a ask it like the same question twice. Make sure it gives you the same answer. Have a friend that maybe you could check with. And then again, if you're in the community, if you're in this community here, you can always attend office hours and ask me questions about breakdowns or send me direct messages about that. But yeah, chat actually is pretty good. Okay. So the only other thing with the schedule, because all of that we've talked about, that's basically this. So we talked about outlining those PDFs. We talked about recall until it's perfect. Once you do that, we talked about doing UWorld questions. We talked about review. And then this is just like if you need to do 30 more, do 30 more. But then we just talked about recording the useful information that you learn. So that's what you do for that entire section. Let's go to UWorld real quick. That's what you do for all of this section of UWorld. And then it's just a repeat. So here is do it for section 2, do it for section 3, section 4. Let me just show through org. So this would be for org. And then I'll just show you physics real quick. Okay. So, and then so on. So you get the picture. The next thing that you'd want to add is spaced repetition. So here, let me just put like a color. This day here is spaced repetition, this Thursday. Right there. This is spaced repetition. This is spaced repetition. I have specific tasks that I have written down. Like here, it says go back over all of Gen Chem, mixed Gen Chem. You do not need to follow the exact things I have. This is just an example, and you don't even have to do it on the days that I've recommended. The idea is just to emphasize you have to have spaced repetition in your schedule and do it as frequently, as often, and take as many days as you need to. So if you're on section 3 of Gen Chem and you're like, man, I think I have forgot section 1, give a day for section 1 and do not even remotely get stressed about not doing new information, because spaced repetition is arguably more important than doing new information, because if you don't remember the stuff you've already learned, what's the point of even learning anything? So spaced repetition needs to be given just like such a higher priority than it is right now by just like the MCAT approach, basically. And again, just do it as needed. Anki has spaced repetition. That's a really good thing about Anki. It has like a formula that it uses. And to be honest, there's no research out there that says, hey, there's a formula for spaced repetition. There's not even research that says you should gradually like space it out longer and longer. That's not even supported. So you really don't have to worry about how you space it out. Just do spaced repetition. Okay. Any questions on? Okay, let me get to these. Okay, so accessing the PDFs, let me just throw a link in here. So this should take you to the welcome page. So it is subscription based. It's not free, but it's fairly affordable. If you start it now, you can do a free trial, which is just it's 3 days, and then if you use the promo code in there, which is fall, I believe it's been a while since I looked at that, but I think it is fall. That'll drop your first month to $9. So the idea is that first, just get in there, see if it's what you thought it was, and then that's your like first 3 days. You can use this promo code. Your first month is $9, and then if you hate it, it's like okay, you're out $9. Not the biggest deal in the world. But if you like it and you're coming to the office hours, you're messaging, you're using the PDFs, you can download this schedule here, and you can download this checklist here, so you can use all these things that we're talking about. Then hopefully you think it's worth the $39. You will have to get UWorld on your own. That's not included. Obviously, it's more than UWorld on its own. It's more than that. So yeah, so hopefully that link works. It should take you there. Okay, so we talked about what to do for each section. We talked about the spaced repetition. I'll just point out the order of things right now. In the order so far that we've talked about is Gen Chem, org, and then physics. I definitely would do Gen Chem and then org. Where you put physics doesn't really matter, but Gen Chem does prep you for org. And then after that, section 1 of biochem. So this is all physics. You're finishing up physics here, physics. And then you get to section 1 of biochem. You want to do this because what we're trying to do is prep for this double AMC section from a real double AMC test. So we're going to take the CP section from a double AMC full length 1. And that has a lot of biochem in it. And that biochem is mostly covered in that section 1 of UWorld biochem. So you're going to prep for this just like everything else. Nothing changes. And then do some spaced repetition days. Get yourself feeling really fresh on all of CP, because your goal is not like, this is my first pass through CP and I'll do another pass later on. Your goal is to be a master of CP at this. And that's why we're doing so many practice questions. That's why we're doing spaced repetition. That's why we're doing so much recall. This is not a light passover of CP. This is mastering CP. And then when you take this section, you want your score to be pretty close to what you want on the real thing. So if you want a 515, hopefully you get near a 129 on this section. If you are a couple points off, it's not like a huge deal. You can probably move on to the BB section, but now you know I need at least a couple more weeks to work on CP. And this, I think, is really effective because it lets you plan out your schedule and be a little bit more accurate in your predictions on when you're going to be ready. And so I really like taking a section really early on from an official test, because there's no question about that score. That score is solid. You know exactly what it means, and it's just super accurate and predictive. Okay, let me check chat. Okay. The PDFs don't have video explanations. I'll just say, do not expect video explanations. I'd love to have enough. It just takes so much time. I mean, do I think they're good? Yes, I think they're good by themselves. People who I tutor use them exclusively, no Kaplan, nothing else, and they do totally fine. But they're very diligent about memorizing everything. There's no like, hey, I didn't memorize some PDFs. Can I still get a 520? It's like, no, you really got to memorize everything. And then also be doing that technique of learning stuff from UWorld and remembering that stuff as well. But yeah, as of now, no videos. And then, so is it doable for people who work full time? I think whether or not you work full time doesn't affect this approach. This is the approach I would do in any circumstance. If I were going to retake the test, so starting from like a 520, I'd be hoping for higher, right? I would take this exact same approach. The only change I would make is that I'm just moving faster through it, because it's like stuff I've already seen before. There's no situation where I think I would change this approach much. If you're working full time, it just might take you longer. And you'll have to watch your UWorld percentages and your double AMC score to just gauge, and I'd also say your recall. Like if you're being honest with yourself and you're trying to get memorized a PDF and then you're practicing the recall and you're just not getting it, you got to stop and do more time. And it's just going to draw out the process. But again, I wouldn't change the process, because you have to have something memorized before the test. There's no shortcuts to it. So let me know if that answers the question, if you have any follow-up with that. And yeah, for cars, let me address cars. I can do cars right now. Okay. I think I covered everything with the CP section. Yeah, let me just jump to cars then. For cars, you can start it at the beginning, or you can give yourself a few weeks to kind of get in the hang of things. Doesn't really matter. What I would recommend you do is pick a day and do 5 cars passages together. Don't do 1 cars passage a day. The reason for this, it's kind of a mental thing. I think that when people do 1 a day, it's really easy to get like 3 out of 5 and just brush it off. You're like, 1 passage, no big deal. But if you get 20 out of 30, then it's like, okay, that's a sample size that I did not do well on. I have to improve my cars. And what this allows you to do is intentionally take your cars, trying to get better every single time. And with cars, it all comes down to review and how well you're reviewing it. You have to be very, very hard on yourself with understanding cars passages. For every single question, you have to understand the wrong answers, why they are wrong, and the right answers, why they are right. And probably more importantly than any other section, you cannot have the answers revealed when you're reviewing cars. You cannot know what that right answer is when you're reviewing, because you're challenging yourself to understand that logic And if you know the right answer, you're going to justify it to yourself, whether or not you understand it or not. And cars is probably the most important one where you really need someone else's feedback to like have them read it. You give them your justification for all the answers and just see if they agree with you. It can be hard on your own to be positive about your reasoning. So feedback from someone for cars is really, really important and helpful. But again, it's all about the review for cars. And yeah, that's exactly right. That question, you do the PDFs and then you go straight into UWorld. Okay. Any questions on that cars stuff? And we can talk more about the cars review process. Do I do cars workshops? Yeah. So for workshops, the workshops is really like just if you join the community, send me a message that's like, hey, I want to do a cars workshop. I will schedule it and then other people will just join. So it's really just like what do people in the community want to see a workshop over? And cars would probably be like one of the most popular ones. So yeah, just like tell me, hey, I think I would attend a workshop next Thursday and I will schedule it next Thursday. You can come and then anyone else who's interested can come. Same with the office hours. If you're really needing help, send me a message and ask for office hours at a specific day and time, and I will most likely schedule one there. And the only time I won't move office hours for you is if someone else has already kind of like requested a time, then I'm going to keep it there. But if no one else has requested, no one's RSVP'd, and then you ask me to move office hours, I definitely will do that. And then this recording, I'm going to have to just look and see if I can make sure I can edit everyone's names out. And if I can do that easily, I'll probably post it on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel that I'll probably put it to. Okay. Keep asking questions, but I'm going to look back at the schedule here. Okay. So scrolling down here, you take that CP section. At this point, you're very informed. Are my study techniques working? If you bomb this, hopefully you don't bomb it because chances are if you bomb this, you were not paying attention to your UWorld percentages. And those were probably really low and you probably moved on or you weren't being strict about your recall and getting that perfect. So hopefully no surprises on this CP section. But if you bomb it, you do need to go back over stuff and you need to evaluate, am I recalling enough? Am I reviewing my practice questions enough? But if that goes well, move on to biochem. You're going to do biochem the exact same way. You're going to do these 4 sections. And then after that, you'll do the exact same thing for bio. Finish up bio. Once you're done with that, you can scroll down here. We'll see a BB section. The exact same thinking. You'll take that BB section, see how good you're doing. Once you do this, you can take a full CP. You can take a full BB since you're prepped for both. If you've been doing cars, you can take a full cars section here. You're pretty much like ready to take near full links. And then you'll just repeat the same process for psych soc and then take that psych soc section. Now, I do want to be crystal clear. I do not have PDFs for psych soc like I do for the rest. I do have, it's like the same idea. It's notes that I use to study for psych soc from Reddit, though. It's not stuff that I made. Everything else I made from scratch. This is stuff I used from Reddit. And I've just cut it down to like the high yield stuff. And I can share that with anyone who joins. It's just not like part of the community since I didn't make it from scratch. But I can share that with anybody. That being said, there's a lot of good psych soc resources already out there. It's a little bit, to be honest, it's just a little bit easier of a section to prep for because it's a lot of memorization. So same approach though. I can share those documents with you if you join and ask me to share them. No problem with that. And you just use them the exact same way. And there is on this checklist here, it does over here tell you what to do for psych soc. These are the topics that you want to cover and for what sections. Okay. Let me check the chat. Okay. Once you do this for all of psych soc, you have already done a bunch of sections. You should have gotten tons of spaced repetition. You should be feeling pretty much ready to take the test. And you should know what score you're going to get because you've taken these sections. All that being said, we're still going to take some full lengths. You can take a double AMC full length and then just see how you do. It should be right in line with all the scores you've already gotten. Ideally, I would like to see somebody have like 3 weeks left just to like get their score up and up and up as high as they can. If you were not scoring where you wanted to on the sections, like if you won a 520 and you were getting 128s, 128s average out to a 512. So if that's you and you didn't take the time to get it up, which is fine. Like if you're at a 128, you're good to move on. You just have to know you need more time to get to a 520. You're probably going to want more time, like 5 to 6 weeks. And you would do a full length. You would review it the exact same way we've talked about, write down all the stuff you learned from it, and then you just repeat that whole idea of spaced repetition, recall, and reteach all the topics, and then just put a heavy emphasis on learning every single thing that came up during practice questions that you feel like you maybe don't have quite memorized yet. And then you just do that over and over and over until you feel like you have no gaps at all. And then ideally you see those scores start to go up. Okay. Any questions about any of this at all? Because that's the whole prep process. Any other details here would be kind of details about the review, what to do when you find gaps, how to review content more effectively, or if you have any questions about the thing that I provide here, the subscription service. I talked about it some, but there's the office hours, the PDFs, and a few downloadable things, and I'm still adding stuff. I don't want to make any promises about anything because I'll just add it as I go, but stuff like passage reviews and different workshops and things like that, and some like worksheets that I'm working on. But any